Is it just me, or is there a lot of great westerns this year? So The Hateful Eight is the newest Quentin Tarantino film. It came out December 30th, so it just came out in time to be considered a 2015 film before 2016 got started. The movie is set in a time where it's after the Civil War, but it's still really fresh in the minds of the Americans that lived through it. And that becomes important to some of the tension that happens throughout some of the southern and the northerner characters in this film. But anyway, the whole story is about Kurt Russell, who is the hangman. He's this bounty hunter that captures his bounty alive so that he can bring them back to hang. He feels that's a more justifiable death than bringing them dead. So his newest bounty is this diabolical and very crude woman. But suddenly a blizzard hits and they have to find shelter, so they find shelter in this inn. So now a group of 8 strangers are all pent up in this one-roomed building, but one or more people might not be who they say they are, and they might be trying to break free the criminal. And so then the whole movie pretty much becomes a whodunit Western film. I have to say, Quentin Tarantino does it again as a really marvelous, amazing movie. Now granted, I do not like this film as much as I like Inglourious Basterds and Django Unchained, but I do feel this is a really good movie. Really amazing movie, to be frank. In fact, if I would try to explain this movie to people, I would say that it's mainly Django Unchained meets Reservoir Dogs meets Clue. That's pretty much what this movie is like. The cinematography in this film is absolutely stunning. I'm not talking about the film it's shot on, because it does give a wider screen and it gives you a little bit more to view, but the scenery views are breathtaking. The camera movements and the angles are really stunning, and even just the framing of the film and what you see on the frame is really telling of the movie. Sometimes I was looking at the side or the edge of the screen to try to see what more I can see and try to see other characters in the background, what they were doing, because the movie gave me a feeling of paranoia. And that's kind of what you want in a mystery like this, because here's the thing. We don't know exactly who all these people are. They tell us these stories of who they are, but we're not quite sure if that's the truth. And so there's this paranoia as you try to figure out, oh, who's the bad guy, who's going to do what. And you're kind of on the edge about all these different characters because you're not quite sure what to make of them. Now, is it slower than most other Quentin Tarantino films? Yeah, sure. It's one of those Quentin Tarantino films where it's a lot of talking, a lot of people just sitting in a room talking and conversing and about politics, about other types of things and motivations of characters. And to be honest, it's only the second half of the film where the whodunit mystery stuff starts really happening. But I have to say, the first half of the film still gave us that tone, that gave us that paranoia, gave us that sense that something is not quite right. And from the first couple lines of the get-go, there are characters that are a bit paranoid and cautious of who they trust, and so it gives you that sort of injection of paranoia and mystery and things not being quite right. So it's set at the very beginning of the film, and the first half of the film, while it's many people talking and you're getting the motivations of characters, the backgrounds of characters, you still are trying to think, okay, what is he lying about? Is that really the truth? What's really going on? In a sense, it reminded me of John Carpenter's The Thing, and how paranoid and how they're in the middle of a blizzard. And yeah, there's actually a bit of The Thing in this movie for me, which is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. So of course I gotta love The Hateful Eight for reminding me of that. Despite it possibly being a little slower towards the first half of the film, I was deeply engaged with the characters, with the dialogue. The thing about Quentin Tarantino is you either love him or you hate him, and his dialogue is either spot on to many people or just something that is a little too crude, too over the top, too crazy for other people. The Hateful Eight has some really interesting characters, really great dialogue, a lot of good moments that are just freaking amazing. the shootouts and the violence doesn't happen until the second half of the film, but I thought the payoff for it was extremely well done. Very Quentin Tarantino in the gore factor, where it's darkly comical, but at the same time being artistic a little bit and just over the top. Acting-wise, everyone was phenomenal in this film. Even the more minor roles were absolutely amazing. So great that I feel the need to say all the actors' names because they were just that great. They really embodied the characters that they were supposed to be. We have Kurt Russell, who is great. Samuel Jackson was probably one of my favorite characters in the entire film, not only because he's such a badass, but he's a bit more complex than some of the other characters. Most of the characters are pretty one-dimensional, but nevertheless, very interesting, very entertaining type characters. I think Samuel Jackson's character was one of the characters that had a bit of a deeper background, had some things hidden in his past, and you can't quite figure out what he's going to be like. It's almost at the beginning of the film, he had this mask where he looked like he's like the best character of the film, the good guy, the guy that's the most honorable of all the 8. But then his true colors start to show halfway through the film, and he's also such a badass because he's just one of those bounty hunters that is very observant, and you can tell what he's thinking, who he's suspecting as this person that is not who they seem to be. He's a very smart, very sneaky bounty hunter, and I think that was great. Jennifer Jason Leigh was also really, really great. She was completely diabolical, very twisted. She's probably one of the best evil villainesses that I've seen in a movie. Walton Goggins was really great as well, and pretty much he's probably the one person that isn't one-dimensional. Like, his character actually goes about a change by the end of the movie, so in all honesty, he might be the main character. He's also the character that gets us introduced to everyone. Like, he's the one that sees who everyone is and gets really excited. He's like our way into the movie and figuring out who all these characters are. Tim Roth, I like him as an actor, but I had a feeling that his character would be annoying from the trailers. He felt like he was going to be a Christoph Waltz type impersonation, but he was really good, and in no way was he annoying throughout the film. In fact, I really liked his character. And Michael Madsen also played a really different character, in my opinion, because he felt like the more sympathetic character. He felt like the character that was going to be the red herring that everyone suspects, and so I really sympathized for his character. I thought he did a really good job. In all honesty, pretty much all 8 of the characters deserve like an Oscar nomination because they were that good. Now I absolutely loved this film, but there's a few things that I do have issues with. For one, there's this point in time, 2 points in the movie, where there's narration and it comes out of nowhere. Like, there's no narration throughout the entire film except for 2 points in it, and it's very short moments, and it feels unnecessary. It feels like a way of explaining what's happening when you could visually see it without the narration. It happens 2 moments in the film. It feels really random and out of place, and that's one of the nitpicky things I can say about the Hateful Eight. Also, there is a bit of a snag when it comes to the pacing at a certain moment in the film. Now listen, there's a scene added in that talks about the past and talks about before our main characters get to the house. And so we see a flashback and a whole entire scene, and it's really epic, it's really great. It's a great Tarantino scene by far and needs to be in the film. But quite frankly, the way it's thrown in there definitely messes with the pacing a bit. Like, there's this big shootout, this big thing that happens, and you're left on the edge of your seat, and then suddenly, boom, it does a flashback to before the movie began, and it's really offsetting. Now with that in mind, I can't think of a better spot to put that flashback scene because it feels like that's the only place it could be put, but at the same time it does mess with the pacing even though it needs to be in there because of just how great the scene alone is. So it's hard to judge, well, what else could they have done with that scene? There is definitely a very uncomfortable scene in the movie. I thought it was uncomfortable, at least. I totally get where they're going. It deals with Samuel Jackson and Bruce Dern's character, who's this Confederate, and who Samuel Jackson, of course, he's black, so he was this northern soldier. And so, of course, they're going to be button heads. And there's this story that Samuel Jackson tells Bruce Dern's character, and let me just say, it's very uncomfortable. I can understand why it is, because he's egging the Confederate on. And I think there can be some different interpretations of that story, because it could be all false, it could be a big exaggeration where part of it is true, or it could be completely all true. And it's up for the audience to decide how much of it is true. But let me just say, it gets so over the top in a very uncomfortable way, at least for me, and it felt really out of place for that character, because before that moment, we think he's pretty much our good main hero. It isn't until around this part where we start seeing his true colors. So now I kind of like that scene a little bit more, because it is that showing of his true colors, but at the same time it did, when I first saw it, it felt out of character, out of place, and a little uncomfortable. Other than those three little things, I think it is an absolutely amazing film, and definitely one of Quentin Tarantino's better films. The Hateful Eight for me is almost 5 stars, but because I could think of some nitpicky things to say, it's not quite 5 stars. It probably should be 4 3/4, but I don't do quarters for this last year, so I'm gonna have to say 4.5. So, did you see The Hateful Eight? What did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If not, what is your favorite Quentin Tarantino film of all time? Now, I have not seen his biggest, most classic movie. I have not seen Pulp Fiction. I'm ashamed of that. But as for the ones I have seen, I think Django Unchained is honestly my favorite one. As always, this is Bruce Gifford, and this was Just My Opinion.